it's important for Africa to have a common market, a free trade area initially, but then an integrated political and economic society. By 2030, that may be a long shot, but certainly we are going and heading there. There is no reason whatsoever that building a unity of African states and our federal system should not result in a common currency, an African common currency. I am sure some of you have understood that building common currencies can take a long, long time. I seem to remember that the treaty or the law that initially started the Pilgrims thinking about a federal state or a union in the United States of America was back in the 17th century, early actually of the 17th century, and then was ratified 150 years later with a common currency. And establishing that common currency took approximately 10 years. In effect, if you have a common currency, you will ensure that goods are easily passable in exchange from one country to another. It will also make you look at the tariff barriers, because if you make one movement of a currency over the border to a tariff barriered state, then that means it will be more expensive for either export, imports, and even the consumers. Imagine a country where the entire economy spends 70% or depends on 70% of its income from consumers. These are the type of countries we are facing now and in the future. Now, consumers like stability. And one of the things that you have to have in stability is currency. You may initially put that currency in a common basket, and therefore the exchange rate becomes reasonable. You may have to connect all our banks based on a common thinking of central banks and economic unions. But what is finally most important is that ultimately in Africa, if we have one currency, the world can deal with Africa as one. It may also lead us to think, incidentally, that we are one, because we all speak one economic language, a common currency. Now, the Abuja Treaty of 1991 foresaw that. As to whether we are going to achieve it by 2030, that is something that one cannot say yes or no, but given the current signatories of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and also the countries that have ratified it within their own local environments, it is an impediment if we don't start thinking of a common currency or the basis of a common currency. Every bank in Kenya, in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Mali, in Senegal, in Gambia, in South Africa, in Botswana, in Egypt, in Algeria, should have one basis of translation of the currency. And that way, consumers can send goods because they are stable and sure of the currency they will get. So, does it mean we shouldn't trade with the rest of the world? No. On the contrary, we will always trade with every part of the world. But suddenly, when you look at the economic exchange amongst the African states, you're surprised at the low level. In effect, we are less than 20% in terms of global trade when it comes to dealing with trade with intra-African states. What does that mean to the mind of an ordinary person? It basically means that we would rather trade with the richer friends like Europe, with the United States of America, with South America, with India, with China, with Australia, than with our brother who is next door. Lately, services and goods can actually increase the consumer spending in each of the African countries by more than $80 billion. If we only, as citizens of one country, knew the services of the other country or negotiated better deals. One of the key issues that obviously a single currency could bring is that we have to systematize our regional economic communities, trade financing, trade customs and excise duty, and remove those barriers that hamper our movement of goods from one place to another. Immediately after the goods move and services move, and developing of platforms where we can trade online, then you have also to think about the physical movement. I know COVID-19 has taught us that we can trade online, we can speak online, we can discuss online, we can engage in economic and academic and even family discussions online. But the fact remains that if you buy goods from me, I must transport them. We need a good transport system. We cannot think of a transport system if we do not have an accepted regional economic bloc. You are growing into a population of more than 2.5 billion people in the next 20 years. It would be sad that that strong market is disintegrated, separated, divided, and cannot deal one with another. Am I saying that it is fundamental that we should have a regional economic community that would lead to a federal system of government like in the United States? The 50 countries or the 50 federal states of the United States took 150 years. Are we going to take 150 years to discuss whether we should be a federal system? The longer we take, in my humble opinion, the more we are controlled by the powers. The more we cannot discuss our trade negotiations with strength. The more our raw materials will leave our continent without us having a say. The more raw materials will leave our continent without their riches trickling down to each and every person in Africa. In effect, the longer we stay divided, the longer we stay colonized in our resources, colonized in our capacity for industrialization and movement to industrialization for our agribusiness, our mineral resources, and so on. But more than that, you will keep doing what we have always done, which is remove the raw materials from Africa. We are not strong enough economically to develop the industrialization of those chemicals, send them to the industrialized country, and then import them back. What do I mean? Get your people to act as slaves in the cocoa farms, get the cacao or cocoa, send it out, and then bring it back as a consumer cacao into your country, whether you are Cote d'Ivoire, whether you are Ghana, northern Nigeria, and many other countries. There is obviously the problem of employment. If we industrialize, we will create what we call a generated consolidation of raw material application, what I basically call an aggregation of goods. Without industrialization, you don't have an aggregation. The only thing you will have is a middleman taking your raw material back to the United States, taking your gold to the United States, to Europe, or wherever it is they are good at making gold rings, then bring it back to Africans to buy. We would hate African goods. We would always, in that case, say, I am better off because my gold ring comes from the United States. Yes, and I will whisper to you, but the gold comes from Africa. The diamond comes from Africa. The oil is capable to feed all our energy needs. And we have all the solar in the world, but we cannot move there. We have one river or two rivers like the Congo and the Niger River, which have adequate capacity to feed the entire Africa with energy, clean energy. But we will never decide to use it for the good of the Africans because we are never integrated. We will always have to take our oil out for processing. These are the things that make me feel, at best, you have to quickly go to a regional economic community where people move freely from one country to another. It's possible. It's very possible. We have to have the protocols like that Pilgrim Law in 1679 or 76 of the United States that told the pilgrims how they were going to act when they crossed into the United States looking for gold. And that was agreed by all the unions so that there would be a sense of justice and order. Certainly we need those laws that will enable us to be in order. But most of all, we need willing leaders. willing leaders who are ready to put down their current good standing in the community and power to amalgamate into a superpower. Africa, a superpower, must need a consolidated, united currency. There is no doubt about that. But what will be the basis of the currency? What is the basis of the European euro? The European bank? What's the basis of the dollar? The United States economy, 70% consumer. That's what it depends on. The surplus of consumerism is enough to sustain in the United States the strength of the dollar. What will we Africans base our common currency on? Frankly speaking, I don't think that's a very difficult question to answer. Why? If coltan, if gold, if copper, if diamonds, if natural gas, if 60% of the agricultural land comes from Africa to feed the world, still virgin, you have enough basis for your Africa common currency. And I have been thinking all along that the more we are divided, the more we are weak in trading with one another and trading with the world. We will always be used. I don't want to speak of countries where you can see that effectively taking place. We seem to be going into another quote-unquote Cold War, economic Cold War between the US and China. Are we going to allow Africa to be divided once more, as in the Cold Era, between the capitalists and the communists? Do we have the pride of ideology based on a common African unity and the good of our people and the strength of our populations and the reduction of the poverty that coexists with all the riches in the world? These are the things that make me wonder, are we still Africa, desiring Africa and wanting our motherland Africa to remain beautiful in our forests, in our flora and fauna, in our natural national parks, in our rivers, in the undulating hills everywhere you go, in our deserts? We need variation, we need beauty, a bouquet of beautiful things that have been left here by the Maker. Yet, because of our poverty of union, we never decide to strengthen it. We never decide to come together. And therefore, 80% of our trade is actually with people who are not African. That's why we remain poor. That's why we will never give jobs to those young people. At an average age of 19 years in the whole continent, there is no way we are going to continue being slaves. But certainly, we are going to keep sending our populations to the depopulated areas of the world, like Canada. The United States has to ask for immigrants. And you know who they take? They always take the best of the best. Africa, can we unite? Can we find the strength? Can we find the courage? Can we find the force to do good to our motherland, Africa? Yes, Africa needs a common currency, because without a common currency, the complications of trade in goods and services is very difficult. And therefore, we must move towards it. And by 2030, this should be coming as a reality. Thank you very much.